Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast number 898. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what you got to do tonight. For your kind consideration, we're going to cover all kinds of news in Formula One. But before covering any news in Formula One, you know what I have to do? I have to go all the way to the right coast of our nation, nestled in our nation's capital. You know her, you love her, the lovely, the redoubtable Grace. I gotta say, how awesome is that? You are totally decked out in all your McLaren gear. Love the coat. The papaya glasses are awesome.
Thank you.
And the hat. That's nice.
Right.
Very nice. It's, this is great because, I mean, I blame F1, honestly. They had all those back-to-back races. I mean, Paul is sick and tired of talking to me. It's been forever.
He's over it.
He is. He's over it. He's off racing at Road America this weekend, and he's had it with me.
He has real things to do, unlike you and I, right? Like,
That's right. That's
it's
exactly.
like a team to run or something. I don't know.
He's got like races to win and silly stuff like that.
And there's this. But here we are.
I love the fit. The drip is awesome.
Thank you. I feel like for 3 weeks I got to fully support it as much as I can because who knows what's going to happen in Zandvoort. So
yeah, you do. You got to celebrate.
Yeah, for 3 weeks. So this is the look. This is the my new McLaren jacket. Even though, mind you, it's feels like 100,000 degrees outside here right now. So
yeah, you're gonna get super hot in that fleece.
It's very nice though, and I feel like Of course, Flip got this for me, and I was like, well, I feel like now if I fall in a snowdrift, I won't be lost, right? Like
they'll find you.
Right. What was she wearing when she left the house? This.
The loudest McLaren fleece ever. Yeah.
That's right. Here we are.
I love it.
Fully supporting. I feel like I'm always like, I don't know. I'm kind of hedging the McLaren thing. Not now. I'm in 100%.
You're in 100%. And you don't care who wins, or you do? Lando or Oscar?
I mean, that's a tough one, right?
It
because
is.
Oscar's pretty good. And,
I know.
But of course, I got the feels for Lando. But I feel like Lando needs to get on the horn and talk to his buddy Fernando. Because I'm a little bit afraid that's what we're facing here, right?
Yeah.
Like, it might not be so great for you. But
I know. It's sort of that. Remember that time when you were at McLaren, Fernando, and then the new hot shoe came in, Lewis Hamilton? Yeah, how'd that all happen?
With the pants off of you, how'd that work?
Yeah, right.
Pour him some tea. It'll be great. It'll be great.
Yeah, it'll be great. That's
so
awesome.
I'm a little more concerned for that aspect of it than which one of the McLaren drivers gets the World Drivers' Championship at the end of the year. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
sense. For their own morale, it's a little rough.
Right. Well, and Paul's a bit of an Oscar fanboy for all the right reasons.
As he should be. Again, that kid, he's pretty good.
Yeah, he is. He's very good. Well, that's awesome. Well, catch us up. Since it's been 3 races or so?
4 races.
4 races since you've been on the podcast. Catch us up. What's your thoughts on the races? Anything stand out to you? This is your moment to just discuss your thoughts.
Well, all of it. I mean, I feel like, so I've missed a lot.
Yeah.
Right. So we had Austria with Yabba Dabba Doo George, which I thought that was the funniest thing that one could say when winning a race. Like, of all the things that crossed your mind, Yabba Dabba Doo was what crossed your mind. Excellent.
Who knew? It's perfect.
Although it seems like spot on for George. Like, if anybody else had said it, you would have been like, really? George, Yabba Dabba Doo seems kind of like spot on.
It's kind of his, it fits his overall vibe.
Yeah, his very white bread, I don't know, middle of the road, George Russell kind of ness, right? Very non-offensive, Yabba Dabba Doo, who doesn't love the Flintstones? We're good.
Right.
So then, and Oscar came in second, so that was great.
Yeah.
And then we had Silverstone, and Lewis won, third by Lando. That was great. Who wasn't, I guess if you don't like Lewis Hamilton, you weren't happy, but otherwise, it's always nice to see, a British guy win at Silverstone. Lewis has been, on the downside of things here recently, so it was nice to see.
Oh, it was a great comeback, a fantastic drive by Lewis.
Lewis Hamilton there. So and then we get to Hungary. Now, usually, we're seconds away from having a lock in our fantasy GP team, and Flip goes, well, who should we pick? And he kind of hems and haws, and he, because you have a certain amount of money to spend, so he's moving people around, moving drivers around. I was like, it's Hungary. Make sure you pick McLaren. Make sure you pick Lando and Oscar. We're done. Like, this is the only input I have that is of any use at all this entire season.
Right.
And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, I'm sure. And of course I was sure. Because I know in the past, whenever we've talked about like tracks to get rid of, inevitably Hungary comes up. Because I kind of agree with the Julian Palmer idea of like, it's Monaco without the walls. Totally. Hungary, not usually that exciting of a race. But you can't get rid of it. Because even in the worst of worst, it's the only track that McLaren is always good at. So you can never get rid of Hungary.
Right.
And here we are, 1-2, right? Hungary. They always come through for me. So that was, so we get the, win by Oscar, right? We had the team orders. That was a bit of a dicey thing. I do want to get, so I don't watch the international broadcast anymore. I don't watch Sky. I watch Formula One because that is what it is. And not trying to be disparaging towards anybody, but I do appreciate that David Coulthard, who was one of the commentators that weekend, was very he had to be re-traumatized about having to do team orders and having to give up, the lead to, Mika Hakkinen. And I was just like, I thought it was just, that's the kind of insight that you need, especially if you're, haven't been watching the sport since the 70s or whatever, right? Like you need that kind of insight. Was really great from DC, but I felt like we should send him free therapy or something afterwards, or a hug. I hope Julian Palmer gave him the funeral director pat on the shoulder, something, because it just seemed, it was rough. It was rough for him, but I thought it was good insight. And then I did like when Julian Palmer did, because the third, I can't remember, but he's not a race car driver, the third guy that does Formula One. And he said to Julian Palmer, and you've been in this position. And about 2 beats later, Julian Palmer goes, oh, I've never been in this position. Yeah, which is what I said at home. I was like, why are you asking? I mean, David Coulthard has for sure been in the position of team orders, but Julian Palmer would have to be somewhere higher than 15th in any given race, right? To really have team orders. And while I really like him as a commentator, I like his feedback. His years on the track weren't many, and they weren't very close to the front. So
they weren't many and they weren't successful, but they were there.
But I did appreciate that Julian Palmer very, fully said, I have never had this experience in Formula One. Please don't put that on my name. So thank you for being honest, because you could have just let that go. Most people probably don't know, and it would have been fine. I knew, but other people would have just been like, okay. But so thanks, Julian Palmer, for being upfront about that. So then we get to Belgium, and, we have George almost yabba dabba do a second time. Yeah. Not so much. He had to yabba dabba undo that. And we get a second win for Lewis. So great for that. And, I think also I did enjoy the pre-race conference with Lance. Did you see this? There's the one, because they asked him about team orders from the week before. Lance the whole time is just like this. Literally, even when they're talking to him, he's just full on. I realize, right, that not everybody watches the video, right? But, he's full on slouch, bored. Couldn't be more bored to be there. And then Valtteri Bottas is like, no, me and Lewis, I never had any problems. Yeah. I regret nothing.
And Lance is like, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that whole press conference was just great. That Valtteri is still just he's living his best life. He's trying to get a seat for next season, and Lance couldn't look more bored.
Right. And Valtteri's still carrying the same team party line. No issues at all with team orders.
I have no regrets.
Nothing to see here.
It was great.
Was never asked to pull over for Lewis.
Yeah. And I think that, and I'll just leave it here, that Hungary, there was, I mean, after the race at the Hungaroring, I'm pretty sure I texted you and Paul was like, I don't know, you better be filling up the soundboard. There were some great lines that came out of that, right? The whole, this is childish, get off the radio, right? But I think by far my favorite radio outtake from these 4 races was Charles Leclerc at Silverstone when he tells Ferrari, how about next time you tell me the weather before the race starts? Yeah, I don't know, Ferrari. Maybe that would have helped him out. It is Silverstone. Maybe you'd look at a weather map before we got here. But I enjoyed it. It was 4 really great races, and I tried to I always say I should take notes. I actually took notes, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to be on for 6 weeks. People aren't going to care about my notes.
Right.
from Austria. They're going to be like, Grace, I don't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday, and you're talking about Austria? We don't
That's
care.
like 3 races ago. Nobody
whatever.
cares.
Nobody cares. We've moved on. We've already yabba dabba dooed our way past that. But
We have.
I'm still right there, and I'm bringing you right back. So
All right,
it was
so
some good times.
So you're a McLaren fan, but
Yeah.
3 of the last 4 races are won by Mercedes.
Yeah.
So are you going to dip into your Mercedes Lewis Hamilton gear anytime soon, or are you sticking with McLaren?
Well, being that I am married to Team LH,
Yep.
it would be mostly me dipping into his merch, not my own.
Right. But that's it. I love your consistency, even though Lewis, won, all those championships, Mercedes won all those championships, you still weren't parading around in Mercedes. You still hung in there with your McLaren gear. You could have been. There's ample material to work with around your house,
That's
but
true.
you stuck to your McLaren. Good for you.
No. And I think also in like prime LH times, at McLaren was, pretty easy to get merch, and somebody else in my household is willing to spend the money on merch that I am not.
Yeah,
I am
right.
willing to buy funny glasses off of Amazon, a full McLaren jacket. I am not. So, that helps too with the merch.
Right.
Because the stuff isn't
Right.
cheap. It never is. The hat I bought, this is old school.
Yeah. That's old school. You've had that a while.
I have since like 02 or something, right? When I first started watching.
Quite a while. Yeah.
Old school.
Quite a while.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like, do I have to like tape off the cigarette advertising? But it's authentic. I've carried this hat around a lot. So
West McLaren Mercedes.
it's seen some days.
Oh, man, that's old school there.
Yeah. It survived the hailstorm.
It's
So
like the Kimi era.
it is the Kimi era. That was what got me into McLaren. So
Yeah. It wasn't Mika.
no, that was a little bit before, right?
Just
like,
a
'cause
little
Mika was
before
like
your time.
99.
98, 99, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, David Coulthard, Kimi Räikkönen is
Right.
when I got into McLaren.
Spa 98, David Coulthard.
That guy. Mark that off your bingo card.
Right.
I'm pretty sure Grace showing up in some giant orange glasses were not on your bingo.
That was not on my bingo card. I love the glasses.
Thank you.
Those
You
are
gotta
awesome.
you gotta lean all the way in on your fandom.
You do. I mean, I got Ferrari crap all over my house. As evidence behind me.
Yeah.
Heck, my lock screen on my
Nice.
phone's got I just Ferrari crap everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why, but just stick with the team. That's why Paul doesn't. Paul doesn't. He doesn't follow teams. He's a driver guy. He's a driver himself, so he cheers for drivers. He likes drivers, but he doesn't get wrapped up in teams.
I think that's the safer for your mental health way of going.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. It's not easy being a Ferrari fan these days.
Team fandom is much harder on the
It's very
soul.
hard. Yeah, it's very hard.
Just pick a driver and just stick with them.
Although he liked the 6-wheel Tyrrell. I think he liked a lot of the Tyrrells. He liked the Hesketh a lot too.
He just likes the weird cars. I mean, but
He
who
does.
doesn't? There's a lot of like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was one of the great things of at Austin. We went the first year that I'm just like, look at that car, that's ridiculous. He has like this whole like, I'm like sitting next to Formula One Wikipedia. It was great. I again always recommend that. Have a Charsley with you when you go to a race. But it was pretty fun that he was just like, oh yeah, because he knew all this history from all these cars from the 70s and 80s. And I'm just like, oh, I've never seen it in real life. Look at that.
Yeah.
So
that's the Ligier with the world's largest air intake, or the arrows, the ground effects with no wings. Yeah, it's all that stuff.
I had no
idea. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
I like green. I don't know. What do I got? Nothing.
Ooh, that's a nice color.
Yeah. That has too many wheels, right? Like, I mean.
Right. And then there's usually me banging on about the lack of French racing blue on the grid, which drives me nuts.
That's fair. That is fair. There's a problem.
It drives me nuts. Well, I love the gear. Are you ready to jump into some news?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Shall we do that? All right. Sure. Before I get started, I want to say a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. And a huge thank you to all the support you give, because we couldn't and wouldn't do this podcast without our Patreon supporters. So I wanted to mention that, give all of you a shout out. You guys are the best. Really appreciate your support. Very grateful for that. Also, the podcast is at your favorite podcast player. You can find it on our website. You can also watch the podcast on our YouTube channel. So you can do that. Usually on our main page at theparkformay.com, you'll see in the center of the website, you see the YouTube episode as well as a podcast player there. So you can always listen or watch from our website. So, all right, let's jump into some Formula One news. Now that Grace has shed the super warm McLaren fleece, and let's talk about the first big news. In your 2024 predictions, did you have Carlos Sainz moving to Williams?
No, but I don't. It's not as crazy, right? Like, it may not have been on my bingo card, but I don't know that it would have been like, it's not like him going to a team run by Michael Andretti. That would have never been on my bingo card, right? So
right.
But I could see this, right? This doesn't seem quite as crazy.
Yeah, let's talk about it. There are some interesting things about that, and I think in most of the press, the Formula One press in particular, I think there's some reflecting. I think all of it, that I read, is all really good insight from, paddock reporters that are trying to piece together motivation. I think, it's a combination of anything, when we've talked about, you and I have covered driver signings for a long time now, 17, 18 years. And, it's always a combination of opportunity, performance, compensation. Pay is always a major factor, of course, and timing of when all this happens. And so as I saw, going to Williams, I think most of us kind of heard that he was talking to Williams even before the announcement came out. So we all pretty much knew that there was a possibility to go to Williams or Alpine or possibly Audi, right? So Carlos Sainz signed a multi-year deal with Williams and released that this week. It raised a lot of eyebrows, a lot of people speculating why he would join Williams. My initial thought of this, Grace, and I'll just read through my notes and let you fill in where apropos, but my initial thoughts were
or interrupt you wherever I feel
or
like
interrupt me at any moment.
How you put it. You made it sound very nice and polite, but that's not what happens. Okay.
Or feel free to interrupt at any point.
Yeah.
I my first thought was that the team showed him a significant. There's many things here, but the first thing I was thinking of, okay, well, they must have clearly showed him a serious or significant uptick in investment, infrastructure, and maybe even the projection of where they are shooting for, and shared some inside information, maybe some technical information, potential technical hires they're going to make, those kind of things. James, I like James Vowles for a host of many reasons, but James is a very practical guy and very candid and very straightforward, and I think he's tried to put together a serious program for Williams that would see the team get back towards the sharp end of the grid. And I think he would share those things. I think that's the thing I like about James. He's usually very candid in his response about the issues within his own team. He shared this with the press, and I just want to read kind of his commentary about bringing Carlos Sainz on. To your point, he was just absolutely gushing over the signing of Carlos. You texted something that was pretty funny.
As much as he gushes, which is also what I love about James Vowles, because it's the old engineering joke of, right, like, the emoji is the same face, happy, sad, my wedding day, the death of somebody important to me, right? It's all the same. And James Vowles is like the epitome of, like, you can tell he's excited, but his words are very much monotone, all the same. And I love that sort of engineered delivery that he has.
Right.
Giving this very gushing, he's very excited, but, the tone.
Yeah. And he has all every right to be. He should be excited, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what he said is, quote, what he's not buying into, he, meaning Carlos Sainz, what he's not buying into is 2025. What he's buying into is what we can provide over the next 2 years, and what's the direction of travel. It is monumental to beat these two incredible organizations, and I think he's talking about Alpine and Audi. But what Carlos recognized from us and much of it you won't see, is that we're changing on the inside. I believe that's what won it from the beginning. I gave him warts and all. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to go backwards. Here's why. Here's what we're investing in. Here's why I'm excited by this project. And it's your choice if you want to be part of it. I know that we will have success in the future. I know it's going to cost us in the short term. And I'm confident that honesty and transparency have paid off, end quote. And that's kind of what I was alluding to, Grace, just that open, candid, just to hear is a raw assessment. And here's why I'm excited.
Yeah.
Which
that's, I always like watching Mercedes does them too. I think all the teams do them, but Mercedes also does a big production about their like post-race and that you talk to different people. And James Vowles, I think, is always like, yeah, we didn't have a great race this week. Here's why. Yeah. I just think, he is always very candid in those like post-race fan videos that Williams puts out. And it's that same sort of candor where he's just sort of like, yeah, we're working on it. We got a better coffee machine now. It's not as good as Ferrari's, but it's better than the Mr. Coffee that was here when I arrived. So yeah, we're working on it, man.
Right. On the surface of it, I like that. And I think Carlos would resonate. Carlos, yes. Just having watched Carlos for many years now and his personality, I think he would appreciate just a very straightforward, candid approach to this and no smoke and mirrors, just to really understand. Totally. Carlos strikes me as a pretty measured guy, in his choices that he makes. And I do think he probably researched it out. He's got serious representation from his management, his father, motorsport legend, that kind of thing. So I think he's a pretty measured operator. He's a smooth operator. Now, on the surface of it, I'd say that isn't quite enough to draw a talent like Carlos. So, of course, the money, I think, must have been very nice. And, sometimes that's enough, but other times it isn't. Some drivers want to be in a competitive car right out of the gate. I think that's something that Lewis, in his career, Lewis has always been able to navigate his career to a competitive car, competitive team situation, even from entering Formula One. And I think that's one of his better skills, is being able to read the tea leaves and make the right moves at the right time. So for Lewis, being competitive is ultra important for him. Not that it's not for Carlos, but I think in Carlos's motivation, it'd have to be multivariate in what's important to him. And I think maybe long-term is important for him too. My hunch is that Williams has upped their investment from Dorilton Capital, and I would imagine that they've got some very interesting roadmap things coming. Some rumors suggested that they were sniffing around Adrian Newey.
Everybody is.
Yeah, I think everybody is. And that might be interesting for Adrian Newey. I don't know. I don't know Adrian, but that might be of interest in joining. And that certainly would be something that tipped the scale a little bit for Carlos, knowing that you've got the most successful race car design engineer in the history of the sport that's getting ready to come to Williams. I don't know that that's the case. It's just a rumor. But if that's true, that's a possibility. I think James is absolutely right, though. I do see Carlos struggling next year for sure. I don't think the team's going to turn anything around in that time. But you never know what will happen with Williams in 2026. Just like you don't know about Mercedes or Red Bull or anyone else. It's new technical regulations, and some teams flounder and some succeed. So yeah, I don't know. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I think that as we're going to get to, right, this decision isn't in isolation. It is not like there's a seat open at every team, right? And so that's part of it too, is you have to look against the other teams that he could be at, right?
Right.
Which is part of the reason why one lands at Williams, right? I think when you look at that. But I also think that, yes, of course you want to win. That's always important. But as Jake Humphreys pointed out to Fernando Alonso, how does it feel to lose 90% of the races that you enter, right? So it's just not, I don't mean that they don't have that edge. Like I can hear Charlesley, well, of course they went, of course, right? I get that. You don't get into the sport because you don't want to win. But that's also the reality of it, is that he could be short at whoever ends up being the top team in 26, whether that's Red Bull or Mercedes. and it could be great and it could not be great, right? And I really think that part of it is that, also, I don't know that he needs more money. It's not, I mean, of course, money is money, for sure, but I don't think he's hurting for money in the way that maybe an Esteban Ocon might, doesn't, he comes from Carlos Sainz money. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to do it. But what does it is the flexibility, right? And I think as we get into what the other teams that he could have gone to, that's one of them, right? That flexibility coming in, and what, like a team like Mercedes, he could be the second seat at Mercedes, but you're just a seat warmer until Kimi Antonelli can get in. Nobody wants to be in that position, right? They're going to support George. They're going to back George. They're not going to get rid of George. They're going to get rid of you again. So then it's Ferrari all over again. I think that he was really successful with the support of a McLaren. And it seems to me the best place to get that kind of support is going to be from James Vowell and Williams. That same sort of like we talked about that video they made when Carlos went to Ferrari, right? We made fun of Zach Brown's, attempted Italian, right? Like, you don't usually get that from a team. They're usually like, like Mercedes is going to be like, Lewis, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I don't think there's going to be this like love letter that there was from McLaren to Carlos. I think Carlos, that's something that that he values and he wants. Plus, there's always memes about like, find somebody who loves you the way this whatever loves this whatever. If James Vowell says to you in a video that he had a wave of emotion flood his body when you signed, like, I'm pretty sure he didn't say that to his wife on his wedding day, right? Like, I just thought right there, when somebody says something like that, you find somebody that loves you the way James Vowell's just loved Carlos Sainz in the public video that we all watched about the signing. A wave of emotion flooded my body, right? And so I think it just provides him with that stability while between 25, 26, and 27, and that they aren't just going to like blame him. They aren't just going to get rid of him. I mean, because even look at the team and how they talked about Logan Sargent. We all knew Logan Sargent was not that great, right? We watched this sport, and even in comparison to Albon, it's like they're not, your teammate is your best gauge. And so I think even in that same video, he still was like, we still love Logan. We're going to find Logan a place. We're going to make sure Logan continues to succeed. This isn't just we're pitching out like Ferrari did to Carlos. I think as a person at his, so I get it, what Carlos is like in his 30s, but like in like regular people jobs like you and I have, he's like mid-career or something almost.
Exactly.
So if you are mid-career, so you put yourself in the like late 40s, early 50s of a normal person job, you aren't thinking necessarily just about like your priorities are different.
That's right. Yeah, it's an F1 shelf life, right?
You want to be successful. You've got, more than one but less than 5 years left in the sport. What do you want that to look like, right? You don't want to be middling. I would, if it was me, I'd rather be at Williams for the rest of my career and enjoy it and not be winning every race. But that legacy is there.
But to that point, it's a good point, Grace, you bring up, because being there, being part of that development of the team and the resurgence, or at least the execution of the plan that they've put before them, is an interesting long-term, perspective. And I think that would fit with what Carlos wants. And to your point, there's a limited F1 shelf life for careers.
Yeah.
So, they're not going to race until they're 65 and retire like you and I would.
Right.
In our day jobs. But so when you think about that, some people rightfully so, with Sergio doing so poorly, why wouldn't Red Bull be a viable option? It's a potential race-winning car and all that. But that volatility of everything that's going on at Red Bull, and Carlos signing up to go be, for all intents and purposes, Max's wingman for the next 2 or 3 years, would not interest a guy like Carlos.
No.
But going to Williams and being an integral part, along with a incredible driving talent like Alex Albon, I think the two of them make a very potent driver pairing. Now, the car isn't going to be potent, but the driver pairing is.
Yeah.
And I've waxed poetic on how incredibly detailed I think Alex Albon's car development feedback is. I think he's terrific at it, and I think Carlos is too. So Yeah, it all makes sense. And I thought what we could do, you mentioned this, and this isn't the way I wrote the notes, but it's a great point. I think maybe as we go into the next two stories, we'll drag Carlos with us through these two stories and at least talk about why this may not have appealed to Carlos, right? Yeah.
Before you do that, I just want to make, all right, so we're 31 minutes into the show, and I'm going to mention MotoGP. So every week, MotoGP does, they have a podcast. Last on the Breaks, I actually found the name of the podcast. But anyway, they do an interview, usually with a current driver. But this week, they did an interview with Loris Capirossi. Capirossi, right?
The Loris Capirossi.
Right. And so again, it was really interesting, really great, especially because to me, Loris Capirossi would be, when I started watching MotoGP, would be like somebody watching Fernando Alonso now, right?
Yes.
Like, towards the end of his career, what's all the fuss about Fernando Alonso? Why does everybody care so much, right? This old guy, not so great, right? And so he talked about his time at Suzuki, which is the end of his career, which is where I watched him. And, he basically said, hey, the bike was trash, but those people were great. And that was some of the greatest time I ever had in MotoGP. Right. And so I think there's something to that, you were developing that bike because then that bike did go on to win. Now they're out of the sport again. We won't talk about that. But you know what I mean? You were on the way up with that team, Loris Capirossi, and that there was something to that I think that Carlos is also here for, right? That being on that upswing and helping Williams become great again, be Williams again, be the Williams we all want them to be from the early 2000s, right? Like, we want that. We want Frank to be proud, right? So if we could be a part of that and Carlos could be a part of that, it may be his greatest time, even though he may never win another race.
Right. No, I agree. The other big news, and we'll drag Carlos along through these other two stories with us and just talk about those because they're all sort of interlinked with the Carlos Sainz story. Individually, they stand on their own, but there is a Carlos component. The next big news this week was that Audi announced some changes. I mean, it was the biggest news since it was announced that Andreas Seidel was leaving McLaren to go to Audi. Oops.
Right.
Sorry. Well, that is the big news. Andreas Seidel out at Audi. And they announced that they were hiring Mattia Binotto first. That was the first big news.
I think not just that he's out, it was how he was out. And of course, did I write down anybody's names? I didn't. But because Seidel's the only one I know, right? Because when I heard this news about Seidel being out at Audi, I was like, what happened, right? Like, what do you mean he's out? Well, apparently him and the other guy couldn't agree. So the guy that's above them was like, he did the old dad, I don't care who started it, I'm ending it, I'm firing both of you.
Right.
Who wants to work for that? Carlos Sainz? Do you want to work for somebody that's just like, I don't care who you are, you two can't agree, I'm firing both of you? That doesn't seem great. Fire one or the other, figure something out, move them around. I don't think that looks very good if I'm about to join your company.
No. And so this is, what's interesting is Audi would have approached Carlos. So I think a lot of the Audi story is more so than Alpine. I think a lot of the Audi story is on a timeline that is also juxtaposed with what Williams offered and the end date of the offer. So, they put offers out, but there's dates, termination dates of the offer. We need an answer by such and such, right? So the Audi innuendos would have been previous to the decision to move Andreas out. Now, whether they were having conversations internally or not, I don't know, but it was before the official out of Andreas Seidel. And so Audi previously had announced they signed Nico Hülkenberg as one of the drivers.
Right.
So then they announced that Andreas Seidel is leaving and they are hiring Mattia Binotto, former Ferrari team boss and technical guru, Mattia Binotto. So as fate would have it, they signed Nico Hülkenberg, they ousted Andreas Seidel, and they're hiring former Ferrari boss Mattia Binotto. And then, so let me just unpack that for a minute. Okay. So Carlos drove for Andreas Seidel at McLaren. He knows Andreas Seidel.
That was the big link, right? When Seidel went to Audi, everybody was like, Carlos is going to go to Audi.
Carlos go to Audi. He drove for him. He knows Andreas,
a big link, right?
assuming they get along swimmingly, right?
Right.
Then the ouster of Seidel and bringing in Mattia Binotto, and you think, well, Carlos drove for Mattia at Ferrari. You know, they're probably get along fine. And so while we're losing Andres and the connection to Carlos, we're gaining Mattia, the more recent connection to Carlos. Makes total sense, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't that make sense? And then a day or so later, they announce that Red Bull's Jonathan Wheatley, been there for 18 years, mind-blowing, Jonathan Wheatley, leaving Red Bull after so long and delivering so many championships with Red Bull, is joining Audi, right? And you think,
it's huge.
well, Carlos drove for Jonathan Wheatley when he was at Red Bull. You know, they know each other. They probably get along swimmingly. So you're scratching your head thinking, what? Why wouldn't he go to the Audi project? It is a Audi team. It is Audi doesn't lose in motorsport. It's a works team. They have their own engine program. They've got Mattia Binotto. They've got Jonathan Wheatley, both friends of Carlos. Why would you not go to a team like that, right?
Well, I mean, first of all, Formula One's a small world. I work in a small field. Everywhere I work, I probably work for that person, right? So I imagine Formula One that's even more so. It's probably every person he's worked for. Right. Somewhere at any place. But, you know, these are the names we know. And I don't know, you know, usually at any place, I don't know anything like the team principal and maybe 2 or 3 other people. And that's mostly from F1 manager that I know who any of these people are, right? Right. But I had a previous employer who shall remain unnamed, who people, when they would apply there, would go, well, there seems to be a lot of openings at Agency X. Maybe that's a sign, right? You want to go to someplace where there's openings, but not too many openings. And to me, I get it. They're Audi. They're a works team. They're not on the grid yet. They're not on the grid yet, and they've already had this much turnover. Mm-hmm. I don't trust it. I am also been around long enough. I don't believe it until the day Audi's car rolls out of their little pit box. I don't believe that Audi's going to show up because they've said it a million times. This is the closest they've been to actually going through with it, but I don't believe it. And I would be suspicious, no matter the fact that it's Binotto and Wheatley, you shouldn't have these many openings before you even got into the grid.
Well, it does make you wonder, because they would have done the same thing. They would have explained, you know, that, right now they're not doing well, of course. Neither is Williams.
Right.
Now, Williams is beating Sauber at the moment, but, you know, be that as it may. They would have explained their program, what they're putting together. They've signed Nico Hülkenberg.
Which is good. That's a good sign.
They're putting all the right pieces together. Their engine program is here on the development schedule. Their chassis development. You know, they would have covered a lot of the details about the roadmap, the team, what they're doing, what their confidence level. I don't doubt Mattia Binotto and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, right.
Because he's a wickedly smart guy. And I certainly don't doubt Jonathan Wheatley. He's a wickedly smart guy, been around F1 for a long time. He's forgot more than most know, right?
Yeah.
I don't doubt any of those, but I'm wondering if Carlos was doubting the people above them and the decision-making and why Seidel was left, like you said. And there's a lot of movement going on around here. The development of your Sauber car has been either non-existent or very slow. You know, there's something that spooked him about that whole situation. On paper, that should have been where he went, right?
Yeah, but I think on paper that is not where I would have gone.
Yeah,
because I think it's too. We haven't covered Alpine yet, but Alpine, I historically have been known to not be a big fan of Renault in any of its formats because they're never fully sent. This is Audi, again, a team that's not even on the grid yet, acting very Alpine-like. I'm not here for that. I'd rather go to Williams, where James's word is meaningful to me, and he's done things with that team, and he's already proven that the team is on the up and up, even if their up and up is only, he could be at the next Aston Martin. He's probably not going to be at the next Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren. He could be at the next Aston Martin. I'd rather be at the next Aston Martin than be at the next Alpine or Audi that's very Alpine-like here, and it's Alpine's upper management. And you're the driver. You are the most public persona. Mm-hmm. You're the person that's going to get all the crap. You're the person they're going to fire, a la Red Bull, right? So I don't know. I would not have picked that.
Yeah, something spooked him. Why would you choose Williams over a full factory operation from a car manufacturer that does not have a history of losing? They have a history of winning everything they get in. And so you wonder what it was. Now, I do think timing is a factor here.
Oh, sure.
When they were talking to Carlos, even if they were working on deals with Mattia Binotto and Jonathan Wheatley, they certainly would have been under NDAs, and they couldn't have disclosed that until those deals were officially done, right? The timeline. So even if he'd have known then that Binotto was on board and Wheatley is on board, and those were done deals prior to Audi going to Carlos, would that have changed his mind? I don't know. But there was a deadline on the Williams offer.
Right.
So I do think it's sort of a timeline issue too. And perhaps Williams offered him more money than what Audi was offering. I don't know. It's hard to know the details of that. But it is interesting. So divorcing this story from Carlos for the moment, from Audi's perspective,
this is great.
It's really good news. You got Mattia Binotto. You've got Jonathan Wheatley. I think, paddock rumors for a while is that, Jonathan wanted to be a team boss somewhere. So, maybe this isn't that shocking of news that he left Red Bull. So that's really good news. Jonathan's super smart cookie. He's a sharp cookie. He knows what he's doing. You got Binotto. He knows what he's doing. Andreas Seidel, not sure why that didn't work well. To your point, if two head cheeses that they had hired weren't seeing eye to eye, certainly you'd have thought they'd have parted ways or moved somebody, but Andreas would have stayed. So they were there. He was there long enough to give Audi reason for pause on whether he was doing things right.
Work. Yeah.
Right. But having said that, here's what we do know. Audi's going to be heading into Formula One once in 2026 and even really in next year, but they're going to be heading into Formula One with some wicked seasoned veterans in Binotto, Wheatley, and Nico Hülkenberg. I mean, I think they're in good hands there.
Yeah.
Now, whether they can, develop a chassis engine and get in on the ground in 2026 and be relatively competitive, that remains to be seen. We'll see. And at the time, I think for all the reasons to bring Carlos back into it, for all the reasons you mentioned under the Williams story, if Audi does come in and comprehensively is beating Williams, going forward, it's easy to look back and poo-poo Carlos's decision. But it does come back to the point I think you made, which is that long-term stability and being at a team and being a part of that team, whether Audi starts beating Williams or not, may not be a factor for Carlos.
And I think it's the same, for a team that we have for a driver, right? Like, so for somebody to come in their rookie year, like you do, you get Lewis's, you get Oscars, you get these sort of Max Verstappen's, right? You get these kind of talents, but for the 80% of the rest of the drivers that end up in Formula One, they don't have great first seasons.
Right.
And we all kind of give them that rookie pass because it's deserved. This is a lot. This is different than anything you've ever done. And there's nothing in your previous racing career that's prepared you for this moment. The same is true for the teams. And you can hire all the best people. You can hire people that inform, but until your seat time is seat time, right? Until you are on the grid with a car, with all these components put together and you're ready to go, it's going to take a little bit. It takes time. Yeah. They're just not going to suddenly... And look at Haas. As far as we know, the only change at Haas is who's in charge, who's the team principal, and it's a totally different team. Yeah. So I'm sure there's more to it. It's just not that Komatsu's now in charge and he kind of has a different ethos than what Gunther Steiner had, but that team's totally different. That's all it takes. right?
Gunther
It's
said they
just a
finally
feeling.
listened to him last year and designed a better car.
Well, I mean, right? So I'm sure. And Gunther's not going to say they were right, I suck, right? He's not going to say that either,
No,
right?
of course not.
So, but so that's why I'm saying, yeah, I give it space, and it's definitely probably more complicated than just
Yeah, it
one
is.
person. But you can see how delicate that change can be, right? And then it does take time to develop a car, because even if Gunther's 100% right, it's not like yesterday. He's not like he was
Right.
there for 2 years. He was
Right,
there for
right.
some time. They finally listened to him, and then they fired him.
Yeah, right. In the other news, let's talk about Alpine for a minute. So
let's do it.
Alpine announced that they signed Ollie Oaks. To be honest, from a Carlos perspective, I could see why Carlos may have passed on a potential Alpine deal.
Without this news.
Yeah,
If I was
without this
Carlos,
news,
I would have
yeah.
passed on the Alpine deal, but
I could see this. I think there's a lot of confusion over there right now with Bruno Feynman, leaving his role. They're bringing in. They have a new hire in the form of Ollie Oaks, and he was the head of HiTech Racing in the junior category. The news is good. I think Ollie will do a good job, but the Alpine rumors are off the charts. They brought in
Jesus Christ.
Flavio. Name escaped me. I had to hear that soundbite to remember the name. They brought in Flavio. He's like, I'm just here. I'm a consultant, and that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, so they got Flavio there. He's poking around through the trash bin, looking at stuff. You've hired Ollie from HiTech Racing. There's all these rumors that Flavio said, "Hey, look, your engine's a problem. Just get a Mercedes deal." So everybody's like, "What?" So they're Renault, but they're not going to be making their own engine now. They're going to source a Mercedes. That's yet to be seen. Then there's rumors they're trying to actually sell the team because they sold a significant portion to an investment group. Now there's this whole rumor of a potential tie-up or potential takeover by HiTech Racing, who did apply for inclusion in Formula One, but that was given to Andretti by the FIA. And HiTech is partially funded by Russian interests, namely Nikita Mazepin's group. So now there's this whole, okay, so now is there a HiTech, tie-in, and this is Nikita's way back to Formula One. How do we all feel about that? I mean, where does the merry-go-round stop so people can get off this crazy ride? They fired Otmar and Alan Permain, who's been there forever. They promoted Bruno. Now they're moving Bruno out. Now they're missed out on Carlos. They missed out on Oscar Piastri. Everything has gone downhill ever since Oscar Piastri gave him the middles and left.
And it's pretty bad when they were Renault, is like the high point.
Yeah.
Like, again, this is a team that's never had their act together. But in comparison, this looks like the most that they've not had their act together.
Yeah.
Which is something. I mean, that's a feat.
Yeah, you got to work hard. You got to work hard to look this confusing. And I mean, look, I have no axe to grind with them at all. This is Renault, for crying out. It's a works team. It's a manufacturer. They've won championships, many. They should have come back in with Dan Ricciardo or Fernando and killed it. They should have been moving towards the front of the grid. I realize the engines are frozen, and I realize they've got a deficit in power, and maybe that's the whole reason. But the chassis being overweight, the aero being off, the instability of the car, all of these things and factors, you thought they would have gotten, if they solved all those issues and it just boiled down to we got a slow engine, you could kind of live with that. But we're finishing 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th in, every race. Maybe you could live with that. But it's been really, really confusing and difficult. I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I mean, on the surface, if they switch to Mercedes supply on the surface, I think that'll work fine. All right. It's really concerning that if Renault really wanted to be in F1 and clearly they maybe they don't because they were maybe entertaining a Mercedes engine, then they should sell the team to a group that does want to be in F1, like Andretti, or maybe this unnamed group that Otmar Snefnauer is supposedly associated with.
And those are just the things like, I mean, right, you and I, we're here, right, in our houses.
Yeah.
I'm not at races. I don't work for the race or Autosport, something like. Those are just the things that you and I could name as outsiders, right?
Yep.
Those are the things that you're like, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem, that's a problem. Somebody who's inside is like, oh, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So I think if we can see where it's problematic, for sure, there's a lot of things we can't see.
Yeah.
That somebody like an Otmar would be able to be like, oh yeah, you forgot. Hey Todd, he's going to send you an email. Todd, here's like 6 things you forgot to mention on the podcast that are a problem with Alpine, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm sure people like Alan Permain or Otmar, or people that have been, Fernando could probably tell you, have hosted things that are really difficult. And I think Pierre or Esteban Ocon sort of intimated that, they just, they gave him all this feedback and they wouldn't change anything,
So then what's the point? I mean, it's the opposite of, Fabio Quartararo, right? Like he said, I'll sign with Yamaha, but here's my list of 20,000 things you got to do. Oh, and some money for me to stay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the team was like, okay, we'll do that. I mean, that's what you would want as a driver. I can't imagine where you're just like, I'm just going to, I mean, again, you think of it like a job like you or I have.
Mm-hmm.
If my manager says to me, hey, this didn't kind of go the way I thought it was going to go, and I said, well, here are the things that I think are a problem, and a couple of my other coworkers are like, oh yeah, that's also a problem, and I see it too, and nothing changes, guess what? I'm not going to work on that project, and I'm going to try to find a new job. Yeah. If you ask my opinion, I give you my well-formed, educated opinion as somebody who is in the field doing this thing, and you just are like, meh, we're not going to do that. Well,
right.
Why am I staying here?
Yeah, it is really difficult to understand. I mean, to be on the record about Renault, I would love to see Renault at the sharp end of the grid. I really would. And here's what I hope. I hope Ollie comes in with a list of must-be trues,
Yeah.
Gosh, I feel like Chris Farley and Bennett Bauer. I don't play well with others. I'm not camera friendly. I don't wash all the parts of my body. I don't let my scabs heal.
Wow.
So anyway, I hope he has a list of must-be trues for Renault to say, look, guys, I want to make this team successful. I want a Renault lump in the back of this car in 2026. And here are a list of must-be truths. The engine has got to be on song and reliable. The chassis and aero loads have to be figured out. The wind tunnel time, the development program for in-season over 2025, 2026, and 27, they have to be aggressive and well-funded. These are the things that must be true in order to make this team what I believe it can be. I've said about different places I've worked, and people would ask, on previous jobs, why are you even there? And it's like, I'm here not because of the company that it is. I'm here because of the company I believe it can be, and really for Alpine, I'm kind of there for you. I'm there for you because of the team I think it can be. Right?
I think that is Williams.
It is.
Take all that. I want to be here because the team can be. That's Williams. It's not Alpine.
It is Williams. It's not Alpine.
They've never shown that they've been able to pull it together.
I should work at Williams because I would tell James the same thing.
Yeah.
If I started working at Williams next week, I would say, I'm not here for the team that it is. I'm here for the team that it can be. And I believe in you. I believe in your program. And I think we can kill it,
Yeah.
And that may be kind of what Carlos thinks too,
And please wash all of your body. Put that on the list.
When I go into parties, I don't make eye contact.
I try to avoid that too. That's how I get volunteered for things. I will say, now being a remote worker, it's a lot easier for me to dodge work because inevitably I make a lot of eye contact and the manager's like, Grace, will you do that? Oh, man.
Oh, man.
I'm supposed to be looking at my shoes.
Yeah, you're supposed to be doodling things.
Yeah,
like you're taking
right.
notes, right?
Right.
So, speaking of Otmar's Afnauer, I saw an interesting headline today that said that the ex-Red Bull chief engineering officer, Rob Marshall, is the likely leak of Red Bull's secret sauce with regards to their aero, according to Otmar. Now that Rob Marshall's over at McLaren.
Right.
He told this to James Allen, nice guy. I've met James, super nice guy. He's got a podcast, and and this was the quote. It said, "It's definitely possible for one person to come in and say, the secret sauce at Red Bull was this. You should be looking in this direction." That's definitely possible. When you hear things like the aero performance is unlocked through some mechanical design elements of the car, and you know what those are and how those mechanical design elements actually unlock the performance, you can point that team in the direction to start looking here. It's that direction that you then start looking in and find performance. Absolutely, one person can make that difference, especially when you have a massive rule change like we've had. We're now into ground effect cars where we weren't before. And if there was some mechanical elements of the car that others didn't have, then it can happen. I'm not saying that that's what it was, but I do think that there's performance to be had in that area and that it isn't pure aerodynamics, but it's aero-enabled, end quote. Now, you and I always laugh because we go back to that Flavio Briatore during Spygate, right? And we always talk about Flavio. He said, I don't know why they did all that stuff. All you do is poach the engineer and they bring all the intellectual property with them, you know? Yeah. And so... there is some of that element, but yeah, you wonder, Rob Marshall left Red Bull. He was on garden leave for quite a while. Then he joined, and then magically that McLaren has really come on song. That's what happens when you get poached. Hey, yeah, I have that. Wait a minute. I have that. It's one of my favorites.
Hey, what happened?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly. But that's exactly why Red Bull started poaching a bunch of Mercedes engine folks,
Yes.
right? They're doing their own engine program. They went out and poached some engine. That happens in Formula One. And, losing Rob Marshall, who was working closely with Adrian Newey and stuff, you may have said, it's ground effects, guys. You got to look at these two areas mechanically. And,
Right.
there's smart men and women over at Woking. They would have found the Easter egg,
Yeah.
So congratulations, Grace. You're currently enjoying Red Bull intellectual property as suggested by Otmar Snapper.
That's great. Bring it. I'm here for all of it.
Right.
I don't care where it came from.
So who cares, man?
Yeah.
I just love the whole Spygate, just toss that in there.
I will say that, when Flip and I were kind of discussing, where Carlos is going to go and, the strings and the whiteboard. And he had this whole thing constructed that, so Flavio's back, right? After being, thrown out, but not thrown out, just like Pat Simmons, right? Like you're don't ever come back. We'll see you in 3 years. We'll hire you, right?
Right.
So I think that he was like, well, what about Ron Dennis? And so he started going through this whole thing with Alpine that eventually led to Ron Dennis being the team principal of a team owned by Michael Andretti. I'm like, this is what I'm here for. Who doesn't want that to happen again?
Yeah. The conspiracy.
20 years later, right, or whatever, right? Like Michael Andretti and Ron Dennis reunited.
That's hilarious.
Could anything be better?
That's
so that's what I'm
hilarious.
really hoping for Alpine, that somehow that happens, even though that's never going to happen. But
well, I would
great.
just start with my conspiracy. Alpine, big shakeup. Renault finally, and after all these years of treating him like crap, they reach back out to Alain Prost, who comes in and takes over the team and
that's
paints
even
them
better.
Prost blue.
Yes, finally.
Love those Prost cars back in the day.
That's right.
Yes. So anyway, all right. Let's do some Albin's Cat, shall we? It just seems like fun. I have some. Before I get to my oh shit headlines, what do you got for Albin's Cats?
All right, so I kind of glossed over the Max and Lando incident in Austria, right?
Yeah.
So I did enjoy that. This kind of showed the spicier, the car acrobatic team that is McLaren. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed Stella coming out and being like, they're a bunch of jerk faces and I hate them. I love this, right? So I kind of like, McLaren, because especially Zach always plays it like, hey, we're everybody's friends. I'm Zach Brown. We're friends. Let's go have a beer, right? That's very much Zach Brown. I just love this, like, well, we're a little car acrobatic team here, right? I enjoy that. And then, right, we had the team orders, not so great in Hungary. But I did take comfort in knowing that over this couple of races where it was a little up and down for McLaren, that at least I was going to have to talk through this publicly with you, a Ferrari fan, because I know that while you will joke and poke at my pain, it'll never be too hard. Right? It's not like you're a Red Bull fan. It's not like you're going to be like, that's right, Grace, your team's terrible, because you're a Ferrari fan and you know how it feels and you know that it's just around the corner. So
I do.
So
yes.
I do appreciate that. I again, find yourself someone who likes you, like this thing, likes this thing. Find yourself a Ferrari fan to be friends with, because there's nothing that you can experience or feel that they haven't felt and will feel again.
Yeah, right? It's so true. Yeah,
so,
so true.
There's some compassion there.
Yes,
which I
we have many scars. Yeah.
Yes, and I also I wanted to put out there's a little story, but stick with me, it pays off. So Flip has a 2002 Corvette, yellow Corvette, right? And I'm really indifferent about whether we keep it or not. I know that the stereotype is that the woman's like, that's great, get rid of it, but fine, we keep it, we don't keep it, whatever. It's paid off. I don't care. And so, but we started having to go to a mechanic a couple years a lot. And his mechanic, because it's a Corvette, we have to go to a specific mechanic. I got tired of it. I'm like, I don't want to have to keep driving every week to your mechanic to drop the Corvette off. And I had made a joke in the car, of course, in its presence, to say, maybe we have to take the Corvette to the Corvette farm with all the other Corvettes for it to live out its life together, very happy, right? Like your parents might have done with your dog, your family dog, when you were a child, right? We're just going to take it to the farm with the other dogs. Yeah, sure. So maybe that's what we need to do, have that conversation about the Corvette. It needs to go to the Corvette farm. Corvette, haven't taken it to the mechanic since for some sort of random issue, right? The engine light, it's only on when it's supposed to be on. Take it for oil changes, it's fine, right? Great, gremlin solved. I just had to have that talk. Apparently, this also applied to the Formula One season. I have spent plenty of time this season so far, to the point that I'm sure people are like, could you not talk about MotoGP for 5 minutes? Because I'm like, Formula One. Where's your season? Yay, Max Verstappen won again. Who cares? But apparently I've now dogged it enough that coming into summer break, it's finally given us something to watch.
Right. You put it on notice.
I appreciate it. I didn't have to send it to the Corvette farm. It got its gremlins together, and now we have something to watch. And we're going to take 3 weeks, and we're looking forward to Zandvoort. So good job, Formula One season. I appreciate it.
And good on Mercedes and Lewis and George for bringing it.
Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's great too. Especially just as like Lewis, since we've known for so long, he's going to Ferrari. Again, it's kind of like when we knew Carlos was leaving, you kind of have that like bittersweetness to it. Like, now the car's getting it together, maybe.
Right.
And you're going to Ferrari, which,
well, he's dead to you.
Yeah.
He's dead to you. Yeah. So what happens when you're Grace and your favorite driver or one of your favorite drivers goes to Ferrari? They're dead to you.
No,
happened with Kimi, happened with Fernando.
Yeah, that's exactly it. As opposed to, I count their World Drivers Championships as McLaren World Driver Championships. Because that's the only way we're going to get some. Except for this year. We might get one.
Yeah,
Spring, I'm very hopeful. It's the summer break, right?
Yeah. McLaren's got a real shot at constructors.
They do.
I think they can pull it off. Yeah.
Especially
it'd be huge for them.
And speaking of which, and especially if Sergio Perez, who I like that the story was at the FIA, because we were looking at the calendar, Flip and I, of like, summer break. Well, it's Zandvoort and then Mexico, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't get rid of Sergio Perez now because Mexico
you gotta go to
is
Mexico.
like 3 weeks. I would be afraid for my life, right? I mean, Max Verstappen was already afraid for his life last year, and he didn't even do anything to Sergio,
the Mexican fans are like, what the heck? You just fired our boy.
But I like the idea that, Stefano was just like, oh, Christian, my friend, you can't get rid of him. We have to go to Mexico.
Wait until after Mexico.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't do this. I need fans to show up. I need their money, please.
Let's not ruin it for the Mexican fans. Come on. Man.
Right. Keep Sergio just another month, and then I don't care what you do.
Right. Yeah.
So good times.
All right. You ready for some no shit? I don't have a lot of them. Some of them were kind of funny. The first one is, Iconic 90s F1 star looks unrecognizable in viral TikTok with his daughter as she tries on his old racing gear. Is anybody else tired of these horrible, I think we've reached the bottom of the barrel on this clickbait headline in the British press that these days, like, Hollywood legend has this 18-word comment that shuts down all criticism. You know, it's kind of like, it's so bad that that's where we are, that you won't even say the name of who it is. You won't even say what it was they said or anything just to get a click. It is so pathetic and desperate. And then I love when you go to the actual comment section, like you'll see like Daily Mail or pick one that does it. Who's another Telegraph or, you know, who knows. And they have these just horrible headlines like that. But I love going to the comments. I don't click on the link. I just read the comments because it's like a legendary rock star, you know, has this to say about blah, 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 or had this issue or whatever. And the comments are like, oh my gosh, I saw legendary rock star 3 times live, you know. I feel so bad for legendary rock star, you know, having to go through all this, you know. And they just mock it. They ratio the hell out of these headlines. It's hilarious. But anyway, the F1 90s F1 legend whose daughter was running, it's HiTech Racing. I mean, I would have clicked on the link. Well, no, he's not. But I would have clicked on the link had you just said Heinz-Harald Frenzen's daughter, you know, has great time wearing her father's racing gear. I thought, oh, Heinz-Harald, I'd go look at that. I didn't look at the link. I only did it for you guys because it's ridiculous.
Well, I just want to think before you leave this, as a woman who used to be single, men often have what I find not very successful pickup lines. The things that men say to women, I think, well, you thought that was gonna do what? You thought that I was gonna go, oh my God, iconic 90s F1 star. I'm totally gonna click on that link. It must work. There must be some woman somewhere that has said, oh, you're right. I'm dropping all of it. Let's go. This pickup line right here, I'm on it. Let's go.
Totally works. Yeah, it's a great pickup line.
Who works? So somebody must click. They must get some revenue, because just like those guys at the bars that use those lines that you're like, what woman said yes to that statement that you continue to use
crap? You know,
what iconic F1 star did you think I was going to look at? So I don't know. It must work. Or it's the same guys. Maybe that's it. Maybe it doesn't work, but it's those same guys that, of course, it's her fault. I get it. You like women, right? Like there's always you must have a boyfriend. No, your line was lame. Work harder. Right? I have standards.
It's so true. And the journalism is so bad now. I'm not picking on any particular F1 journalist, but the tabloids and all that stuff. It's so bad now that it'll say like Lewis Hamilton has these 8 words for Max Verstappen or sends warning to 8, you know, something like that. And if you actually go to the article, there is 800 words setting up a backstory for a 2-sentence quote at the bottom of it. It is just miserable. Yeah, you know, and it's like, what do they call it? The shitification of technology. Everything has gotten infinitely worse, you know. I was watching a video the other day. I can't remember the gentleman. He's a marketing guy or something, but he was talking about Google. You know, you used to go, you could put something in Google, and all the results would show up, and then the ads were over here on the right-hand side. Now, you put in, you don't even get what you're looking for. You're getting all of its competitors, you know. And it's just page after page of sponsored links. It doesn't benefit the advertiser, and it absolutely doesn't benefit the user of the product anymore. You know, It's horrible, right?
That's right.
And that's how journalism has just gotten terrible.
But AI is going to solve it all, Todd, so we're fine.
Yeah, you know, before we spend all the time working on artificial intelligence, we ought to fix actual intelligence.
So the actual information. Let's start with that.
Let's start with that. Let's start with real intelligence and fix the stupidity. So next headline, quote, McLaren slammed as Johnny Herbert tells Lando Norris to keep his mouth shut. That's not at all what Johnny said, and he wasn't slamming McLaren. He was just saying that Lando has been effusive in the last couple of races about all of his dumb errors and mistakes, And Johnny was kind of like, don't give everybody that fodder.
Yeah, that's right.
If you feel it, that you can talk to the team about it or whatever, but just, and he was saying that he appreciates Lando's honesty. It's a noble thing, but, saying that it's just given everybody fodder, including the team and everything, and it doesn't help really, in the long run. And Johnny's a guy that would know, he's been there. That's what he was saying. But the headline, horrible. Yeah. And finally.
And he's got a point.
He does have a point. I agree with it. I love the self-deprecating nature of Lando. I think that's his humble side to him that I think he wrestles with, right?
Yeah.
And I love that about him. But yeah, I think Johnny's right. It's not really helping. Let's see. And Charles Leclerc's got that too.
Yeah.
Charles is very cut from the same cloth. Let's see. Last, Valtteri Bottas' F1 career may be over as Mattia Binotto considers rogue move. What kind of rogue move is Mattia Binotto already doing? And how does it involve Valtteri? Poor Valtteri. What did he do? All it really is that Binotto may be making a play for Gabriel Bortoleto over at McLaren. He's a McLaren junior driver.
So this makes me think of rogue move. Have you ever
rogue move?
So
rogue move? Wouldn't Oscar Piastri to McLaren be move? That's a rogue move. That's shrewd. That's Mark Webber, man.
Yeah,
he's brutal. He's awesome.
I think this is one of those Valtteri. I see this headline and I think if I was Bottas, I was like, what did I do? I had nothing to do with it. So
what did I do?
I have been in the passenger seat when somebody's gotten pulled over by the cops.
Yeah.
And inevitably, I'm just looking forward. I just want this to be over. I probably told the person they were driving too fast or they were being a jerk or what. I've probably already, what I've already told the team, now that it's public to the cop, they've already heard it, right? So I'm just I just want this to be over because it's the cops. It's never going to be fun. And I just don't want to escalate. Let's just go. Inevitably, they bring me into it. Well, if you won't do it for yourself, what about her? Whoa. Take my name out of your mouth. I had nothing to do with this. I'm the passenger. Don't bring me into this. That's how I feel if I was Bottas. What did I do? I didn't do anything. Don't pull me into this. I wasn't driving the car. I told them this was not a good idea, and they proceeded to do it anyway. So let's just leave me out of it. So leave Bottas out of it. That guy, he's got enough to worry about. He's trying to live his best life. He's trying to get a ride for next season. He's trying to suck up all the pride he has in order to pretend like Mercedes telling him to, let Lewis by didn't bother him. Right. And has to maintain that excellent mullet and mustache. Let's just leave Bottas out of it.
See, I think
to
next thing we're going to see is him in a trucker hat with his mullet saying, I'm a traveler. I am not engaged in commercial business. I'm a traveler. It's my constitutional right. They're going to yank him out of the car or send the firm missile in, and it's not his fault, man.
He's just trying to live his best life.
He is living his best life. Yeah. All right, let's do some mailbag, shall we?
You've got mail.
Lee, great question from Lee. Lee asked this. He says, hello, love the podcast. Thanks, everyone. You're welcome, Lee. Thanks so much for listening. Yeah. No, the appreciation's all on this side of the table, Lee.
Right.
I had a thought while listening to you discuss Ricciardo's tire strategy in Belgium. Do you think the change of allowing DRS on lap 2 instead of lap 3 has made the start and soft strategy less effective? I think it's a great question.
Oh, it is
and
a good question.
I'm dying to ask Paul that because Paul would know better than I would. But I think there may be a little something to that. Because, and I would say that it's compound specific, track specific, car specific, of course. But I think it's a good question, and I'd love to know all of the listeners' answers or thoughts on this, because changing it where it's a lap earlier means that the same shod cars have that advantage quicker or sooner. Right. And the fall off of a soft tire happens relatively quicker comparatively. You're
bringing that graph closer, right?
Yeah. So, whereas if you waited 3 laps and those soft compounds were clear, if on a certain track at a certain grip level on a certain car, those soft compounds, delta between the mediums was greater for those initial laps, then that soft compound start would actually be a benefit, as long as the compound time delta between tires was significant and it was on the right car, on the right track, and the right grip load. So there's multiple factors here, but I think it's a good point.
But it's almost like you'd want to look at the graph of the tire wear to decide where the lap should start for DRS, instead of just always saying it starts on lap 3.
Yeah.
You know, so you could see that when the tires were in some place,
window,
and then you'd be like, yeah, right, that window, whatever, what words, you know,
Whatever.
And that's where you would put it, whether that's lap 5 or lap 2. That's what you're aiming for, is where that strategery would really benefit your tires.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
so great question, Lee. If you're listening, let us know what you guys think about that. I thought it was a great ponder, and I'll try to remember, Lee, to get Paul's thoughts on that. But it's a great question. So, all right.
Yeah, he would know. He would have some more.
He would.
Something more specific than just, some waving hand gestures.
He would. He would. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, Jesus.
So there you go, Lando. All right, well, that does it for this podcast. That's what we think about the news. Let us know what you think about the news. You can do that by going to theparkforme.com. Share your opinion in the post of this podcast. Let us know what you think. Huge congratulations again to all of our Patreon supporters. We could not and would not do this podcast without you. And a huge thank you. If you like the podcast, share it with a friend. Tell a friend about it. Tweet it. Post it. All the social medias. You can go to our Facebook, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, do all of the typicals, because that helps as well. And if you like the podcast, go give us a good rating at your podcast player. We'd appreciate that as well. So, Grace, until next week when we come back, who knows what kind of news we're going to have next week?
Yeah. But
we'll find out. It could be exciting news. You never know.
I'll be sure to upload this to my MySpace page.
Yes. Say hi to Tom.
That's right.
Hi, Tom. So anyway, all right. Until next week, we do it all over again. This is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
See you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.